Hi everyone. This particular program, Points of View, was first proposed by ADN, which stands for Asian Dramaturgs Network. And basically, we had a very young network, I guess, 2 years ago, where we wanted to bring together arts practitioners from the region who perhaps have an interest, curiosity about this burgeoning discipline, field, concept of dramaturgy. I'm not going to go into details about it, but it started there about 2 years ago, and we've been quite lucky to have very successful symposiums, talks, panel discussions, keynotes from notable practitioners, academics, to further the dialogue on dramaturgy, especially with a special interest on certain kinds of practices that have emerged in the region. We've had speakers from Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, India, Sri Lanka, Korea, and Singapore, of course. And it was from there, I think we gone into discussion with SIFA to realize that this part of the dramaturgy, or the whole concept of dramaturgy, is entrenched very much in critical thinking. So what does that mean? That actually means that extending this critical thinking to just looking, talking, thinking about performance making, and not just the performance itself. And realize that it might be a good way to invite young artists, practitioners from different fields to come and participate with us on what it means to then interrogate performance making, a term that I borrow from Charlene from the start, where she wanted to look at then ways of thinking, talking about performance and performance making. And because of that, this very rich program developed with SIFA's help, especially in terms of organizing shows to watch, particularly focused artist talks, where we had the luxury of speaking to artists for an hour and a half in very dense, rich ways. And that I'm very thankful to SIFA. And I think it's time to hear a bit from SIFA. Jobina?
Hello everyone, just give a bit of context. I'm the head of programming in the Arts House Limited. I work with the team of programmers who then support the festival director in carrying out the vision of the festival. As you know, this is Gora's first festival, and we have also reformatted it into both in terms of its timing, its format of it being a condensed 17 days, and also using the Arts House as Festival House, a place where we really feel strongly is the nexus of arts discourse, important discourse, both not just for artists, but also for the audiences who experience the intense world of art that is brought together in these 17 days. And hence, even as we were conceptualizing the program, we thought it's very important to ground it actually with discourse. It being an opportune time actually with working with partners such as Centre 42, as you know, who have been developing that discourse through the year with text-based discourse as well, revisiting past. And I think contextualizing the whole history of art and art making in Singapore. And the festival, of course, being a function of that, being part of this ecosystem. So we then felt it was important to engage with Centre 42 and then with the Asian Dramaturgs Network to then bring this forward in a new program, was then conceived as Points of View. And I think in the past 9-day program, we were very encouraged to see how these I guess about 30 young practitioners, I think the age requirement that was put out was between 18 to 30 years old, from various fields, coming together, really interrogating both the nature of art, the nature of art making, talking to the art makers themselves and even the people behind the scenes, and more importantly, I think questioning themselves and their own practice, because I think even for me, being part of an organizing team, when we put things together, we have sleepless nights, we put our other lives back at the back seat for these 17 days, and we ask ourselves, what is it for? How does it enrich ourselves? How does it enrich society? How does it enrich even the people that we interact with daily? And I hope these questions, I think, will come to fore as they share. And we hope also as the public, when you participate in it, that you can also share your observations of this, what this, I guess, 17 days of art has taught you or has enriched you or even maybe troubled you as well, and that we can then have this, I guess, a time of reflection together, and as we, I guess, have to have the festival end also, it then gives us a space to then reconnect as well in different ways as we come back in different ways with each other. So I think that's just something I thought is useful to share from SIFA's perspective. Thank you.
Thanks.
So what was it Points of View was trying to do? There are two tracks, performance making track and performance writing. And these two tracks were meant to provide a space for practitioners, people who are interested in performance, interested to write about performance, not necessarily just review performance, but write about performance in a range of ways, and make performance, not just theatre, not just dance, but whatever performance might mean. And provide a space in which there could be a lot of conversation, some of which structured around the performances that we watched together in the festival, some of which were focused on particular issues or themes or skills or ideas that in large part were decided on by the facilitators. Hao Nian facilitated the performance writing track with Corey and developed a range of ways in which the writers were meant to read a range of things as well as engage with each other. And I facilitated the performance making track. But more importantly, the participants who had applied and were selected for their interest and willingness to commit fully to the program, and that was very important, that they were able to come for all the sessions, except in a few cases where there were some very important things they had to do, and that they were all punctual. And I have to say, take my hats off to all of them. They were there, they were on time, they were full of energy, they were very giving in what was required of them. It was, I think, pretty tiring. So what was the expectation? The expectation was to bring a lot of curiosity, to deal with the dynamics of the festival in relation to this city, in relation to this country, in relation to the festival as a whole, and to think through context, to think through space and place, to think through form and style, to think through aesthetics, and so on and so forth. And in so doing, hopefully raise their own levels of expectation about what dialogue can do. Ultimately, what is the benefit of spending that kind of time and energy and focus and concentration and feeling as well in simply attending to what other people are saying and living up to the expectations they have when you say something? Not because it's going to be definitive, not because it's going to be prescriptive, but because it then contributes to ongoing dialogue. There's no concrete output for this program. There's nothing that you can see that is going to be the result of it. We were, however, very, very fortunate to have with us in each of the tracks 2 skilled writers who then blogged. Daniel for the performance-making track, and Gwen for the performance-writing track. These blogs are available for the public and will remain on the Asian Dramaturg Network's website, so you'll find them there quite easily. So the intent now is not to fill you in on what happened over the last 8 days, because that information is available. The intent now is to bring some of that sense of conversation and dialogue, some of that sense of interaction and listening and questioning to this public forum. So we've asked the participants who have, over the last 2 days, come together after having worked primarily in 2 separate tracks, have worked together over the last 2 days, 2.5 days. We've asked them to work in 5 groups, and from each group, one person will come up and present a particular perspective on this program based on his or her experience. And then we invite you to join one of the groups and participate further in that conversation. The hope is that this conversation continues in a range of ways, not necessarily just as points of view, but that the energy, the willingness to spend time in conversation and to raise the stakes of what you say when you say something in dialogue, then continue somehow or another. And we'd like that to be as infectious as possible. Okay? So if I can invite the 5 who are going to speak to come up, please.
No, I'm number 2.
Hi, my name is Irfan Kasban. Good evening, distinguished panel of judges. I stand here aware that I am being judged. At this very moment, you are consciously or unconsciously forming opinions, colored by your instincts and prejudices. Questions are popping in your head like, where is this going? Did I leave the stove on? And why is this presenter so handsome? Webster defines performance. I'm kidding, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk about my group and whether, we kind of focused on the scope of the idea of the festival being a gathering of sorts. And this has allowed, this is also the central theme of POV. We were allowed the space, thank you Sifa, thank you Center 42, thank you Charlene and Hao Nian. We were allowed the space for us to meet and engage in dialogue. Sometimes as artists, what happens is you have opinions, you have judgments, but it circles around you and it goes nowhere. Not saying that there is a problem, but meeting of this diverse mind and individuals from all facets of performance just gave a clearer awareness of where our opinions fall in the larger scale. Sorry, I'm shaking because I'm nervous. Communicating our thoughts, our concerns, our reservations, our motivations, and personal investments to art. And I thought that was really important and really nice to hear. Whether our prejudices and instincts changed over the course of these 9 days is not important. It's knowing that we have prejudices and instincts when we watch performances or engage in art. And words like roles and responsibility, positioning and packaging came out. And it was not something that we tried to find an answer to, but just discussed, and that made it for a very fruitful experience. There was also criticality that we explored, and this again is not to resolve arguments, but the more important point I got from points of view was to have arguments. During the course of it, I said a lot of things like, fight me, you know. And also not being apologetic for your point of view. I think this is very important. So instead of apologizing, thank the person for working through this with me. Yeah, so that's my presentation. Thank you. So we're going to talk about awareness, that's all.
Hi, so I'm Anlin and I'll be speaking on behalf of my group. So I'll start off with this, that I believe that the greatest gift we've received for the past 9 days is the ability and having that openness and generosity from both all our facilitators as well as the team that we were in for both tracks. The patience and time to explore and sit in the process of unpacking these things that we talked about, that we do not usually have time to, or do not perhaps bother to think about after we watch a show, after we created a work, after our individual lives and projects as practitioners. And as well as opening up a space for perspectives that are different from us and actually welcoming that. And in this entire program, we've had people from vastly, vastly different backgrounds in terms of age, in terms of being in school, in terms of being in their art-making backgrounds. And it is far beyond our own silos and our own groups of art-making where we have come from. And from this perspective, my guru talked about the ways of engagement and engagement into art, whether it's into work of art, whether it's in terms of engagement with our community, the festival itself, and the wider ecology in which we make art. So in terms of things like how do we engage with art and artists, exploring what we did in terms of working with the festival, exploring the festival's direction, exploring the festival works in groups, exploring what is the landscape like here in Singapore as artists, and exploring how do we facilitate better collaborations, critical thinking, as well as conversations about what it means to make art at the end of the day. And finally, I think we would like to end off with how do we engage in what it means to be an artist here in Singapore, what it means to be a practitioner here, what it means to be a producer, a critic here in Singapore, and positioning our art together with the wider landscape, especially in context of this festival, where it's the Singapore International Festival of Arts. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Check. Yep. Hi, my name is Lee Ting, and we just want to. My group. A lot of times when we were preparing for this, we were talking a lot about how we have been given the privilege of time and space to talk, and just to have conversation. And it has led to, of course, a lot of more personal and practical discussions in terms of how we create, how we write about art, how we make art, and things like that. And hearing more practical and clearer perspectives, I guess, in terms of that. And also making time to listen. And we realized that even among the 30 of us, while we are very varied, and we've all had this opportunity to talk and then have clarity of thought and clarity of what we're doing to some extent, or sometimes even unclarity, because more questions lead to more things and more other, points of view. The community that we've created is based on honesty, love, and care, but also from there being able to shoot each other and shout at each other to some extent, fight each other, and then after that we hug it out. But what we found that was a lot of the times what we think, it's just more nuanced. It's allowed us to kind of open ourselves to talking about other things that we had never considered. Certainly my points of view have been challenged a lot in the last week or so. So we want to talk about what happens beyond points of view. What happens when this ends, but not just in the context of the program, but how do we then include more voices? Because we are, much as we like to admit it or not, an echo chamber between ourselves. It doesn't help that this room is echoey. So we want to ask, what action can we take beyond this? So now that we've gone through this program, how do we share the experience with her? How do we, and not just what we've learned, but the act of talking. The act of sitting down, taking an hour and a half out of our everyday lives and just sitting down and talk. How do we reach out and invite more points of view? And how do we then create the safe spaces for people who would be for people who are keen to know and then to speak? How do we make time for that, rather, as to borrow a word from Charlene, inefficient thing in this world, in our country where everything is so streamlined and beautiful and everything? How do we break that and let that open that up to more people? So if you're keen to talk about that, we're over here. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Shanice, and for us we really talked about what is the role of a practitioner, and really going back to the basics of why do we do what we do. It's very easy, I think, in Singapore to just do all this, okay, one show, okay, next. And this program really for our group was to really sit back and ask those questions, and then have those artists talk about those questions. It was nice talking to Michelle Dorrance from Dorrance Sons Company, Toshi Regan, all really going back and reaffirming this question of why do we do what we do, and what are the stories we want to tell. It's so easy to like get lost in all the abstract context, but for us it was really back to the human question of what is the story we want to tell, what do we want to say, how do we want to connect, then what are the choices then we make to really make those stories come to life. And it was a nice reminder for all of us to really go back to that, and also to search for clarity with our own practice. How do we do that? And each time we have a discourse or a discussion, I think all of us are slowly like, okay, this is the artist I want to be. This is the questions I'm making those choices in my head already. And it was nice to have that space to do that. And especially for the future of our own works, the works we're going to create. And then going back to community. So wait, how many of you practitioners, breaking the fourth wall, feel, it's a good question, feel very lonely in your practice sometimes? Raise up your hand. See, okay, see. It's a very real thing, and I'm really glad we have this program, because it's very easy when you do your own thing to get very lost in your own work, and you are just tackling all of these issues of what you want to say, how you want to say alone. And this program really was about bringing the community together and say, hey, look, all these like-minded people like you in their own holes coming out to just talk about what really bothers them. And it's really heartwarming to see the kinds of views that are brought up in relation to some of the shows we see. Because it's very normal to go to a show and then like, actually I didn't really think about that show that way. And then to hear someone else voice that point, it's a bit heartening, and it's very inspiring to say, okay, then how do I want to make work? And those critical dialogues for us was inspiring to have a space for your voice and to articulate your opinions. For some of us, maybe we are just used to like moving to like express ourselves, and then to come to the room and just articulate our points was good. And being honest and being okay to be criticized and to know what that means in our own discourse. And then to think about, okay, POV, and then what? And to think, and we look forward to seeing maybe like 5 years from now, this kind of critical consciousness we've developed to think about how then the kind of work we make, or the kind of makers we become, and the kind of community we become. I'm quite excited to see where we all are in 5 years. Like maybe do SIFA 2030, yeah. yeah. Sorry, cannot do math. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Desmond. One of the things that our group has really tried to, I wouldn't say focus, but I think the underlying things that we really talked about was the development of a voice. It does not mean to have an artistic voice per se, but we are really looking at the development of a voice. How does it differ from an opinion? How does it differ from a judgment? Because one of the key things that one of our members shared is really how she felt really empowered through the process to be able to voice her opinions, to be able to say what she feels, but with the mind that she or he will be reflected against in that sense. Either you'll be agreed with or you'll be disagreed with in all sense of the word. So we were looking at the whole process of how this happened and how the key elements were very important in how to develop these pieces. One was the openness of the dialogues. We were really open and really accepting of differences. But the second part that we really sometimes forget, or often forget, it's the rigor of the discussions. Because it's that rigor that makes you, that really allows the opinion to develop rather than just an opinion. So that rigor really helped us in articulating what we feel, articulating how we relate to the world. Another one is really the help of SIFA to provide the opportunity to view all of the shows, not all, but most of the shows, and then having that intensity to be able to reflect upon these shows and how we view these shows. And we are very thankful for that, because it's that intense period of going through all of the reflections, and in a very short time that really allowed us to do that. Then one of us really raised the important point of fatigue, because it's an intensive process, it's very tiring. What do we do about the fatigue that comes in? Because that's often a question that we try to avoid or we try to ignore, because sometimes we feel we can just push through the fatigue in that sense. So how do we address the fatigue of, just to dialogue or to discuss, or really just to voice your own opinions about things? Then, so all these has helped or sharpened our thinking processes, in the sense of really being aware of how we think, why we think in a certain way. It's not just about what we think, so it's the why and how that really matters to us. And the questions that we are really caught up or we don't have answers about, it's really about the ownership of these processes after the program, the sustainability of it, and the continued search for each of us for that voice that we are really interested in. Thank you.
Right, so you've heard from all 5 of them, and now I would like to invite members of the public to join them as we break into 5 groups to continue develop the conversation, whichever one that you feel you want to gravitate to. Obviously, these are just some of the talking points that I'd like to share within the next half an hour. They might go deep, they might go near somewhere else. We will still invite you to come and participate in that and open up further dialogue, further thoughts. Yeah. Please. So where are the groups now? For now. So we've actually spoken to the different groups, saying that you don't have to confine yourself to this particular location. I think you can move outside, even though there are activities outside. Just be mindful of noise levels. So guys, please help with the